maybe I can come to you first, and you can explain us why it is a timely topic. What's happening in the world of journalism today?
Well, thank you for having me here. I think a couple of months ago, publishers were still called to get together and negotiate together and be together in the fight for money when it comes to their content. And then there was a trickle of publishers where it started that they made deals with OpenAI. I think Robin AP was early in the US, but also Axel Springer in Germany, my home country. And as you said, what's happening, it's become a flood. Like the trickle has become a flood. And we now, as of this week and last week, we saw News Corp, Vox, Meredith, Financial Times, Reddit, The Atlantic. You were on a panel with the CEO of The Atlantic today. And also in Europe, Le Monde and Prisa, one of the most important publishers in Europe, signing these deals. And it's like, okay, what is happening? What is going on? Where is journalism going to go? Because we know that for large language models, news are the most valuable content. And we know how much it is worth. But what do these contracts actually look like? Why are they all being closed now? Why is everybody taking the cash? Those are some of the big questions that are in the world of journalism right now.
Well, you've confirmed now why it's accurate today, but Robin, coming back to you.
Well, just a show of hands in the audience. How many people still subscribe to a magazine? Hands?
Very doable.
That's good. How many people subscribe to a newspaper? So subscriptions are at a historical low. In the United States, daily newspapers are closing at about one a day, local newspapers, leaving us with the big ones, the New York Times, but even the Boston Globe is struggling, the Chicago Tribune is struggling. So they kind of have their hands tied to get some revenue in. And while some of it comes from subscription, advertisers have left for greener pastures, which was the internet, and remains to see what the advertising model will look like in an AI-driven world. So we're in this, all I can say is it's a land grab by the AI companies that's happening right now, but it's not unprecedented because this started with the internet. If you remember, there was this internet, and then Facebook and Yahoo in particular said, we're gonna have front page news feeds, and we're gonna pay the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal and CNET, and we're gonna pay them all a little bit of money to run their headlines. And what that did was took both the advertisers and the content away from those publications. So I'm afraid what we may be seeing is, again, media companies thinking short term, I need this cash. They're gonna do it with me or without me, but we're not thinking about long-term journalism, which we will talk about shortly.
Okay.
And just to throw a number in, I think OpenAI now has contracts with a combined number of 70, so 70 newspapers, magazine, and news websites, and that just happened.
Like in the last 2 weeks, and the details are really not out there yet. I know the Wall Street Journal, basically they bought a bunch of ChatGPT credits, so they get some free credits to use ChatGPT and some cash that they sorely needed.
Do you know how much? Because
I think I read 250 million, but I don't know if that's we don't even know if that's for past content, current content, future content.
Okay. Yep. Hey, guys, we are at an AI for Good conference, and you're now discussing a lot of gloom at the moment. I do hope that in the next, you could say 20 minutes we still have left, we not only talk about, you could say, what are the threats and what are the disruptions, but also how AI can be a positive thing for journalism. And is it there?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Well,
But let's first talk about, you could say, where things are, what are the concerns? Maybe you want to start with the slides already, or you want to first?
I think we can talk. I'm just going to
Okay.
tell you there's
Yep.
a QR code at the end of this presentation, and you should all download it because there's a lot of tools and information.
But you can relax now. That's,
No need to
Yeah.
take notes.
It is Friday afternoon. That's good. So relax.
This is
Felix.
how I relax.
Felix, what are your concerns as a journalist? What's happening? What do you see?
Oh my goodness. Well, Raman is going to go a little deeper on this, but so there was Web 1, 2, 3, and I think now we're on AI 2, right? And AI 2, for when it comes to journalism, there's hyper-personalization is a big issue. So down to the audience of one. Huge issue for publishers, right? Because as a publisher, you used to collect followers across channels, and now you're just working with algorithms, and these algorithms, they just distribute to whatever audience there is, and you don't know. Second thing is...
Before you go to the second one, you mentioned AI.2. Give me a definition. What does that mean?
Well, I think the first signs of this were about 10, 15 years ago when we still called it big data. Robin?
Yeah, and not generative AI, but AI, machine learning, yeah.
So I would probably call that AI 1, and then since ChatGPT 2, which was a couple of years ago, it didn't create that big of a momentum, but that was probably the beginning of AI 2.
Yeah.
And then we just talked about the mass scale content produced at zero cost, right? That's of course the big the danger. Then also large action models, so that the fact that and I'm sure some of you are working on this, I'm going to have a co-pilot that knows not only what I say or think, but really my actions during the day and is helping with the actions. What does that mean for a publisher, right? Where do I fit in there? And then the inability to adapt. I mean, I was trained in a journalism school and I worked at publishers and I never saw anything that was close to a tech company or close to a startup mindset inside of a legacy publisher. And that to me is the saddest part. So you wanted to hear gloom? Yeah, there it is.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny, I was the editor, the first woman editor of PC Magazine, and I'm going to go back to Bill Gates was writing DOS. Steve Jobs and Wozniak were building a computer in their garage. So PC Magazine, we predicated it on good testing and reporting. And that meant having a framework of what makes one PC different than another, or one printer, or one database, scientific inquiry, documenting everything. And so we really felt like we had the fundamentals of good journalism. And then the internet came, and pretty soon, our content was bastardized along with others. And the need for rigorous journalism disappeared. Everybody was an instant expert. And that's kind of, again, the doom and gloom part. You'll be able to see this later, but there are lots of examples of today's news organizations are actively using various AIs to take care of a lot of work. And so the news outlets are doing it. The low-hanging fruit, you all know. Nicholas Thompson talked this morning. The Atlantic is fully copy-edited, first pass by machines. And they do a really good job really quickly. Everybody knows how to use Grammarly, and a lot of this is now built into your word processors, so it's all automatic.
I can also maybe add that Nicholas talked this morning about when you click on the play button on an article on The Atlantic, and the Atlantic website app reads the article to you. There are humans who are reading this, but there's also AI reading this. And he shared this morning that the AI-read articles are actually more popular, which is kind of crazy. So the synthetic content that is read by AI, people stick with longer than human voices reading these articles.
Is that crazy because you're a classic journalist?
Yes. Yeah, I am team human, yeah, still.
Yeah, but you're not a classic voiceover, which is what people want to hear. So it really, today, there's so many tools that a journalist has at their disposal just to transcribe a call, which I was born taking notes in a notebook and writing as fast as I could and hoping I got it right.
You still got a notebook right there.
I still do. It's like, It's a relic. So that's the low-hanging fruit. The other stuff is looking at images and making sure the image that you're sourcing. And I talked about this yesterday in our deepfake panel. I really do believe we have to get over the shame of saying AI created this and just caption it. Dali made this image for me. Midjourney made this image for me. I got this information from ChatGPT. I checked it 5 other ways. That has to kind of become part of our narrative now, because we're become more dependent on it. So Google Cloud Vision in particular, if you haven't used it, is pretty damn good at telling you where an image comes from. And then there are new jobs. We'll talk about new jobs, right? The New York Times just appointed an AI person to solve all their problems. And by the way, we didn't talk about the New York Times because they are not selling their content to OpenAI. They are suing OpenAI for infringement. And so this is all like literally happened in the last 2 months, and we don't know how it's going to play out. If I were a betting person, I would say Sam Altman is going to negotiate really hard with them and talk sense into them and give them some money to make this all go away. You?
Yes, but the only hope I have is that they may be in the place to build their own large language model because they have so much high quality content.
Yes and no. We talked about this. So when you build your own large language model, you want to monetize it, and that shuts off. We already know we're stupider because half the stuff we want to read is behind paywalls. You want to subscribe to the Journal, you pay. You want to get the New York Times, you pay. So we're stupider as a society, and I'm sure the same is true in Europe, because we're closed off from news. And that could be one of the benefits of OpenAI if they straighten out the monetization part. But I even asked Nicholas, who at the Atlantic, who just did this deal with the Atlantic's content and OpenAI. I said, so are your journalists going to get a raise? No, it's not that. It's just going to keep the Atlantic afloat. So there's anyhow. You all know that there have been very public, never mind Scarlett Johansson, but very public incidents of newspapers using AI to write content that's gone terribly badly. CNET was one of the first writing fake news with fake experts. Gizmodo, a lot of the tech journalists are particularly known for this. These authors, they have bylines. They don't even exist. They're synthetic authors. So that's some of the problems. But here, and we're going to switch gears, is what I think is the solution. I think journalism, like every other business you're in, is going to switch to being a business of you being a data scientist as well as a journalist. You agree?
Yeah. So Felix, you run the remote daily. Are you a data scientist or are you a journalist?
Well, I would say out of data and journalism came building community. And it only works when you have data, and it only works when you have a strong sense of content. And I think this unites all three of us. But you can't do it without any of these ingredients. And maybe community is also a lot of what we're talking today is about community. A lot of this event is about building community. But yes, the data is there is no more journalism without it.
Yeah. Well, there is. So here's my theory. It's pretty simple. So you take a newspaper, just an average newspaper, by the end of this year, 1/3 of it will be written by AI. And that 1/3 is the earnings reports, the baseball game scores, the stock earnings, there was a traffic accident on some street, stuff that is factual, that doesn't need a lot of insight. Like, we're going to lose jobs, and we are going to give that up to AIs that can cover that all too well through satellite imagery, through all sorts of weather feeds. They can do the weather a lot better than the rest of us can. So where we can shine, well, here's what they can do well. They can recognize patterns. And we, as journalists, have to learn how to put that to use. Like, we could spend countless hours going through President Trump's papers, or we could ask an AI to do it, and it could be done in 2 minutes, and we can find the anomalies in everything he said. We can take images from multiple AI sources, from weather patterns, from satellite data, from people entering stores, from video footage. We've never had so much data, so the smart journalist will know how to use the data, yeah?
So it's about evaluating content, adding context, and maybe also fact checking. I heard that Agence France Presse in France are already employing 150 plus fact checkers around the world, which is a new data-based profession within journalism.
Yeah, and there are tools, and honestly, I'm sort of too dumb to actually. You should look at this one. It's amazing. It identifies patterns that you feed it in when you're researching a story, and it's Aleph, and it's publicly available, and what you can get out of patterns, not only to report on a story, but to predict where the next story is going to happen before it happens. And that's becoming really important for the livelihood of media as well. And so large data sets. So Google has something called Pinpoint. It's part of Google's Journalist Studio. Did you know Google had a Journalist Studio of tools? And in fact, you can, in a few seconds, take any large amount of data and search for the one reference that you're looking for. So again, it's a really good way for you to spend more time reporting and thinking and synthesizing and analyzing and less time searching for the needle in the haystack.
So, what you've talked about so far, if I look at it from a layman's perspective, a little bit from the outside, it's just an ongoing evolution of more powerful tools to help a profession improve its productivity, improve its work. Is that how we should view it?
Yes, until it's not. As I said, I do think a third of what reporters do today will be taken over by AI, and I'm being generous.
Yeah, but this is really big. I mean, there's a Chrome extension right now that's called Fake News Debunker that's being, I think, used by 100,000 plus journalists and editors around the world that you just add to your browser, and here you go. I mean, it's there. It's already being used. It's not theory. It's not in a testing stage. It's there. It's part of the all-day, everyday, data-driven journalists that you are painting here for us.
Right, but you know the speed at which fake journalism spreads also. So by the time it's debunked, the whole world has seen the Pope in that white jacket, you know. But just check out the Google Journalist Studio. It's got amazing number of publicly available tools that you can use to help you get through enormous amounts of data. And with the election, all of our elections coming up, I think it's the world's most elections ever at one time coming up this year. I think I can say a lot of not so nice things about Google, but I think they really have done a good service in providing these particular tools. And one of those is fact-checking tools. And fact-checking is really hard these days, right? I mean, there's no fact that you can't find 5 different contradictory facts. So what do you do as a journalist? Well, you tell the truth. We actually have to learn a new form of almost personal brand journalism. Like, I tried my best, but I cannot verify this fact. I made the calls, but here it is.
Well, one conversation I heard here at AI for Good was also, there's people who, of course, who create misinformation, but then there's also a lot of people who say that something that has been reported is misinformation, is fake, and that might be actually the much larger number of people and a much bigger problem. For their, looking at the US is not a good solution yet.
And that's the question I think we should be asking. Can ChatGPT or Anthropomorphic or whatever be our trusted source? Since all it is a regurgitation of everything we've ever said, wrong or right. And that's the fundamental question. So how do you garner trust in a world where all information is there without any trust assigned to it.
Yeah, one tool I saw that made me really hopeful was from a conglomerate called C2PA, led by Adobe. So if you Google C2PA, you'll find this project, and there is, for example, a camera company like Nikon working with a news company like Agence France Presse on a watermark that goes from the hardware of the camera into the software of the camera into the actual image data, and those kinds of collaborations make me really optimistic. That was have never happened years ago, and now it's there, and people are working together to create something that creates trust in it.
Yeah, and Adobe's doing a great job of actually getting the industry behind it on all sorts of standards. There are other positive signs. A TikTok this morning in our conversation, they've announced that if you post a TikTok, you have to check off if you've used, it's self-regulatory, but there's a checkbox. I did this with the artificial intelligence. And in terms of spotting the news, this is going to become a skill also for every journalist, newscaster, and it's pretty easy. We have never had so many ways to spot where a story is going to happen, and just by where traffic is gathering, who's talking about what. So again, it's the data, it's the journalist as data scientist, using data to say, hey, I think I got a scoop. There's going to be a demonstration on this corner today. Newswhip is another one. What's trending in the news? We haven't talked about hyper-local news, but I think there's really a market for and a lot of it's community-driven, for your neighborhood, and it will be citizen journalism.
Yeah, the OpenAIs of this world are going to have a problem when something happens, say, in your neighborhood. We met today, you're from Colombia. So in your particular neighborhood of Bogota, something big happens, and everybody starts asking OpenAI what is going on. Out of a sudden, OpenAI will need a lot of local sources to create a synthesis of news and posts and imagery and other things. So they will rely on local news organizations and even on micro local bloggers, and they will need their content. So there's actually a huge chance for local media to be a part of this, and not being steamrolled by what's happening right now.
Quick question in between. I mean, you're on a roll, so I'm going to let you go for most of the time. But the majority of the information on the internet, including the news, is synthetically being organized, being produced. So are we then going to a world where synthetic information is going to be turned into news? Which, what's your view on that? Because you meant
synthetic or algorithmic. It's
good point.
So algorithmic, yeah, you are, and it's sad because you are the news who you are. I'm not going to see opposing views as much as I should, and that's one of the sadnesses. And actually, keep talking about Nicholas wherever you are. He talked about a new, Facebook, instead of what it was meant to do, which was bring us together as one world, polarized the hell out of us. So he posited that there would be a new social media that would look at what we had in common. Let's say I'm pro-abortion and you're not pro-abortion, but maybe we both like a soccer game. So let's start there and then bring that in. And how would social media look like if we started with our commonalities instead of our differences? And so really, it's algorithms as well, but it's incentivizing different algorithms, ones that bring us together. And yeah. So at the end of the day, is it the end of the day?
We're not at the end of the day. You got 5 more minutes, so you got some time.
Okay, so at the end of the day, what large language models really do is they summarize what's out there, they fetch information, they do create structure. Ask any chat GPT or like to write you an outline. It's pretty good with taking unstructured data, giving it structure. But they all require human oversight. And so we gave you a lot of tools. That's the QR code. All those slides are online. Love to hear what you think, because I know I only touched on tools, but I think Felix teaches journalism now. He's here teaching in Munich, and I think journalists just need a whole new way to learn about all of these things, and we're not doing them the same way artists need to know this, musicians need to know this, how to incorporate this into their
Yeah,
worlds.
Felix, I actually want to come back to you. As a teacher of journalism, is that a profession with a future? What do you tell your students?
Well, again, to what makes me optimistic is there's a lot of very interesting collaborations happening. So, for instance, maybe you've heard of Doctors Without Borders. There's also Reporters Without Borders. It's a very powerful nonprofit. They used to help journalists that are in crisis or in underserved communities. They just opened an AI chapter. Because it's sort of, it's a crisis and you have to help each other. So it's a very powerful thing because they're really based in the SDGs. They're based in what everybody of you stands for, and they're making a really good case globally. So that's just one example. But when you ask me about teaching, I think one core skill, and it maybe sounds like a long shot, but I think one core skill for media is foresight. So you have to be able as a media company to do foresight. And from my experience, is not something that media companies have ever done, ever been interested in, because cash was coming in, right, for a long time. And there is a project by Open Society, which is a nonprofit, called AI and Journalism Futures. And they really try to standardize a framework for teaching journalists foresight, teaching them scenario building, teaching them to become their own futurists, basically. And I think that's really exciting, and that is what I would love to teach.
Great. Maybe another question, maybe detailed question. One of the big issues on social media, and maybe in media as well, is that we have echo chambers. So you talked about synthetic versus algorithm news. The minute you talk about algorithm, you talk about the fact that sometimes we create echo chambers, and we're building communities where everybody gets together with the same opinion. So how do you make certain that we create news which overarches all these echo chambers we're all in today?
On an individual level, I think it's to go to places where you're uncomfortable. And as a reporter, it's to go to both sides of the story, no matter how painful it is, to just not report the side you want to report. This morning, somebody else that was on our panel is from Witness. His name is Sam Gregory, and it's an association to help journalists move to the next level. There really are exciting experiments going on. It's how they'll be sustained. Because at the same time we're talking about all this, we have to throw out the old advertising model or figure out, because ChatGPT, if you notice, they're not serving up ads yet. And websites don't matter. The answer may come from Bon Appetit, but I'm not ever having to go there. And that is a fundamental shift in the way traditional websites made their money and kept their people employed.
Okay. Robin, Felix, we're almost unfortunately at the end of the hour of this session. What I'd like to do is go back to the byline, the byline of this session, go to the audience and ask, can AI help monitor the truth? Raise your hand if you agree that AI actually is useful and beneficial.
Wait, what was the question again?
Well, it's your session. Can AI help monitor the truth?
Can AI help monitor the truth? Well, who says yes?
Okay.
Say
There's no enthusiasm here. So let's. What are your final conclusions with what you share with the audience with this feedback? Where are we today?
You have 10 seconds.
No.
So, I said this in my little drawing of, and actually that drawing was done by Dolly, and I said, draw me a journalist who's immersed in data. And that's what I got, that guy with the hat with the funny eyes. I think that a new set of journalist tools are being created now that will help us do our jobs better, and we should take confidence in that. And I think investigative journalism is going to explode in new ways and exciting ways. So I'm kind of excited about that end.
Robin, thank you. Felix.
Well, we were trained as journalists to not trust anyone. And the counter question is, why should anybody trust us? right? So, and rebuilding this trust, I think, has a lot to do with community, that you have tough conversations with people that you maybe disagree with, but in a safe space and year round. And not just coming here once a year, but really being involved. And that also includes sharing content. I think all of us can look at how we share content today and rethink some of the decisions that we have made over the past years and be a little more deliberate about it, because we might think more about who we're actually sharing to, what is my community, and how do I want to engage with them.
Actually, that's a great, you could say, fact to end this session in, is AI in journalism. Is, I believe, the first time we've covered this at AI for Good. Do we have to wait? Shall we wait another year before we come back next year? Or can we not afford that? What should we do? Last comments.
Who would like to be a part of a year-round AI for Good community where we can all talk to each other?
I think we crowdsource this, yes.
Good.
All right.
Okay, well, we're going to end this session, and those people who raised their hand, we're going to be at the bar end here, right there, getting a glass of wine, where we're done for the day, and then we can talk to Robin and Felix about their plans to organize and continue this online discussion. I want to thank Robin and Felix so much for this great session.